name is Matt Martin. I'm from Applied CAX. And today I'm going to cover some tips and tricks on organizing a reuse library, do some associative fixture design, and some synchronous modeling tools to kind of aid in that process. Reuse library is available for everybody unless it's explicitly turned off. Anymore, it's a great way of organizing your parts in libraries. I usually will start off with creating my own little isolated grouping of parts that other people will then go, hey, that looks like a pretty cool library. Can I have that too? So I'll elevate it up to like a site level and start rolling it out to everyone in the company. Usually after I kind of clean it up and get rid of some of the garbage I may have collected over time. Modeling tools. Synchronous modeling is a great way of going about taking downloaded geometry that you get from Car Lane, McMaster Car, whoever you get your tooling or parts from, even making your own and having to do minor adjustments on them. You can use synchronous modeling tools for that. I'm going to show off some of those tools as well. Assemblies are really easy to use. You can use the replace component tool as long as the part has the same parentage. Your assembly constraints will all transfer over to the new component. And I want to show off some of that as well. I usually get questions about, is there a downloadable library from Siemens? And I'll show where that is, but basically you log into the Siemens download site and you go over to the machinery, the NX section. Under NX support, there is a new NX release independent section, and there's a machinery library in there. And I've got another shot over here showing all the different versions or different standards that you can download. Those standards go from aerospace, ANSI, anti metric to German, Japanese, international standards. So I downloaded all of them to see what was in them. They're mostly the same, but there's also an Excel spreadsheet that's available to show exactly what's available in each of the different libraries. So you can pick and choose what you like. And so I'm going to start off with a part here. This was an image that we sent out with our newsletter. It's a relatively simple part, but I want to do a multi-up fixture on it. So I've built a base plate, and in that base plate, I've created a small pocket and then some clamping features. In order to get geometry in the part that I want to use, I'm going to use a tool called Wave Geometry Linker. In order to use that, on my Assemblies tab, I've got this Wave Geometry Linker button right here. In order to use that, I'm going to right-click and say I'm going to make this the work part. And when I do that, my assembly becomes kind of grayed out and a little bit milky over here, and then I have a hard orange block here that says my multi-up fixture, and this is my assembly navigator that I'm showing. On the part navigator, my very first body is the linked body. So I did a Wave Geometry Linker, created a linked body in here, and just by clicking on the Wave Geometry Linker, I'll show this one off real quick. I can grab different things off of it. I can grab just a face, I can grab a region of faces, sketches, composite curves, datum planes, and the like. But I wanted to grab the entire body, so I grabbed the entire body. I can make it associative at the time of copying it over. So if this part ever changes, which it's just a body, I didn't create this part, it was just sent to me. All I want to do is be able to hold it so I can do things to it, either in the machining world or CMM kind of approach. Making it associative keeps the link alive. If I were to break that associativity, I'd still copy the body over, but any changes in the parent part won't transfer down into the child part. I'm gonna right click on this and say make this one the I could say show only, and it will only show that particular part. And I'll right click on it and say open in window. And I've got my big fixture plate set up. So in there, I did some extrusions, subtractions, created the pocket, created the geometry that I want to put in there, and then I did just a pattern face. I'm just going to make this one the current feature now by clicking on this this column here to make this one the current feature. And my pattern face is a really pretty simple one. It's a 4x5 pattern with a relatively equal spacing. I get my little pattern face nodes that show up up here just to kind of give me a preview of what's going on with it, and I've just copied those faces around. Okay, when I do a pattern face, since I'm not patterning the feature itself, my original hole here, which is a threaded hole, that threaded hole copy does not transfer over to the other locations. So that's just something to be aware of when I do a pattern face. On my home tab, I also have a pattern feature. my pattern face is buried down in this more pull down in here. So pattern faces is just going to take those faces as they're created in this pocket and just copy those faces over. It doesn't really care how those features were created. Okay, I'm gonna go back up to my assembly and turn on all of my different components here. And where did I get these? So I've got a little clamp here. If I go to my reuse library, I've got a little My Fixtures folder, and I've got a little set of clamps here, and I just take this clamp and drag and drop it in, and now I can start placing it. Okay, I get my assembly constraints to show up. I can start putting it into place wherever I want to put it. I can just say okay and just drop it there, and then right click and move it, kind of get it closer to where I want it to be. If I want to just do kind of a fit check to make sure that this one's going to do what I want it to do, I can see that it's going to do what I like, and I can then mate it into position where I want it to be. But it took, a few minutes to put this part in place and put all these other components in place, and I don't want to have to do that for every one of these pockets. I don't want to have to do it 19 more times. So just a really simple assembly feature is this pattern component. And under pattern component, what I can do is I can pattern linear or circular, but it requires to have geometry that I can select. So I could pick a vector, and I can grab a vector off of, let's make that linear again. I could grab this vector. Oops, I don't want that component to be patterned. Say I want that component to be patterned. I'll pick this as my vector. And I can see right there that I'm starting to see a preview of it. My pitch distance, make that say 10 inches, and I could have 5 of them. But this is going to be kind of unassociative, and it's going to be based on knowing the exact distances between these pockets, and then creating a direction 2. Again, I could pick another vector down here, and again, I can start seeing my direction 2 get built. But I'm not really referencing this pocket. If this pocket ever changes, as far as if I adjust the width of my pockets or adjust the spacing of my pockets, it's not ever going to follow those. But what I want to do is I want to tell it to reference an existing feature. So if I pick my component and I pick the pattern to follow, I'll grab this as my reference, and I get it's asking me for an instance base handle. If I just hover over this ball right here, it'll say that this is an instance handle 0, 0, and this is the parent handle. If I hover over this one, it's instance handle 1, 0. So it's the first row, the first instance in this row. If I come over here, I'll see this is instance 0, 1, and as you would expect, this one up here would be 1, 1. So it's just naming those instances going in both directions. So my base handle I want to pick is this guy right here. Then instantly you see that part is copied in all those different instance locations. But I also want to take along, I don't want to have to do it 3 times in a row. I want to be able to pick up these other parts as well. So I go back here to select component, and I just grab the clamp and the screw, and they're copied over. Very quick and very easy, okay? So I may have another need where I take I look at how I built this. This is just a regular off-the-shelf part, and say my clearance to the back side is not really what I want, and I need to make a modification to this part. So instead of going back and making a change to the part file itself, I want to do it right here live in my session. So I'm gonna just go here and make something that's a little bit counterintuitive. I'm gonna do a move command. And in move command, there's this copy section down here that a lot of people just leave closed. But if you open up this copy section, I can switch this to copy. Then every time I pull this out, I get another copy of my part. Okay, 3 is a little bit excessive. I don't really need these, so I'll just go ahead and get rid of them. And I want to make a change to this part. I want to make it a whole new part number. I'm going to add it into my existing library of stuff. Okay, so if I do a save as of this particular part to a different part number, then all of these other parts in my assembly will then also take on that same part number. So I'm going to right click on this part that I want to make unique, and then click on make unique. And it has me name the unique part file. And I want to stick it in a place where I can go back and grab it in the future. So the path to this particular folder in my reuse library here, where it says generic work holding clamps, I can see generic work holding clamps right here. I can also just open the folder and then navigate to where I want it to go. This one it's going to be this particular part number, but I'm going to make a modification to it. So I'm going to make it say maybe I'll do a -2 on it to signify that I'm doing a modification to this part. And I say okay, and then okay. If I look at my assembly navigator, now I have this one part that's been divorced essentially from those others that were in my, oops. And it closed the original one. So I'll go back to my assembly load options, and I'll come back here to as saved, and then click on the other one that was already there. Not exactly sure why I did that one. That kind of surprised me there. Now I want to make an edit to this one. So I'm just going to double click on this part and make it my work part in the context of the assembly. And I just want to cut this nose off really quickly. So I'm going to go into the datum plane. I got 3 points here that I can just quickly make a datum plane. I want to flip the normal direction, and this will become clear here in just a second. And then just use an easy trim body and trim that part off. And I'll go back up to my assembly, and even here, if I hit save, it'll save my assembly with this extra part in it and save this part that I created. And if I look over here in my reuse library, I don't see that one that showed up here, even though I told it to save. Whenever I add a new component in a session inside of these reuse library files, I have to right click and hit refresh, and then I'll see that part just show up right there. Now, it did not give me a decent preview because I was in the context of the parent assembly, and it didn't create a new preview for me. So why is this handy? Why do I want to use the same part again to make a modification to, instead of downloading the part again and then maybe cutting the end off? Well, one, I already have the part. Why download it a second time? And the second is, if the faces and edges are the same as the part that you're replacing, then the replacement command will work just fine. When I right click on the 20 I want to replace and go to replace component, and then replace component, I can select the component I want to replace it with, and then down here I've got a little checkbox that says replace all occurrences in assembly. So if I replace all occurrences in assembly, it says 20 components have been selected. I say okay, they're all replaced. I have this extra part here. I can go ahead and get rid of that now. If you didn't quite see that, my radio pop-up has a delete right here, and that part's now gone. Now I've got this little bobtailed toe clamp that holds this in place. So very quickly and easily, I'm able to make a change. I've made a copy of the part in the context of my assembly, and made a change to it, made it unique, stuck it in my library. I can use it again if I want to. Again, my preview doesn't really show me something that I really want to see. So I want to fix that preview. So I come into my part, I'll hide these 2 datum planes. Oops, went to wireframe mode there. Let's go ahead and hide that datum plane, hide my CSys. No need to see those, and I'll kind of park it in a position that makes sense, and then I'll hit save. You'll see that preview just update in my screen over here. Okay. So my reuse library is a very simple setup where I've got my fixture set up. I have like generic work holding. I've got some components in here for jaws. I've got some clamps in here. I don't have any previews showing right now because I just changed my NX version and my previews aren't showing up for some reason. And I've got a thing of setup blocks and some curt vices that you can see here. And I can see all those previews right over here in my preview window. And when you first set up the reuse library, a lot of times what you'll see is I get my folder structure over here, but I don't get to see what's in them. If I go double click on clamps, I don't get to see what is in that folder. If I come down here to member select, that's where you get to see them. I also have a search function, so if it is a deep library and I know something about them, I can start searching, and it'll filter my list down here of what I'm actually looking for. Okay. So here I've created a fixture to hold this rather complex aerospace looking part. Got some pins, a shoulder screw holding in one of these sections over here, a tooling ball to kind of give it a resting point, and it looks like I need to do a little bit more work over here to clamp this other side. So again, if I double click on my fixture base, and in my assemblies use wave geometry linker to then link in this body, I can use it in the context of my building my fixture. So I'm going to hide this component, or hide that part, and roll my model back in time. So there's my linked body, and I created just a base for my an extrusion for the base. And over here, what I'm doing is I'm just clicking on this current feature column, which is new in the latest versions of NX, and you can walk through your model this way. Another way that I often will walk through models is if I come over here to my ribbon options, over here on the very far right hand side of my ribbon, I get ribbon options. If I come down and I can check on and off different types of features that I want to see, and then a feature replay group, if I check that on, I can see that it turns on what's called a feature replay group. This lets me step my model forward one at a time, and I can see how the model is created as I walk through the part. One thing I wanted to show here is this this text that I'm going to put on my part. This is a fixture. This can be a somewhat expensive fixture that I'm going to use a lot in the future. I want to label it, and I want that labeling to be associative. So I'm going to create some text on here. So the first thing I did was I went to File Properties, and I created a new attribute for the part name and part number. This could be something that I pull into drafting as well. This I'm going to use it in more places than just this. So I have a part number on here, and then I give it a name. Now if I go into my tools, expressions, I say I want to tie something to that. So if let's back up just one here real quick. If I go to curve, there's a text button right here. If I go to text, I'm going to reset this because I've been working with it a little bit, and then I want to put it on a face. And then my text can be reference text. And when I click on reference text, this field becomes not writable, right? So if I type in applied CIX here, and then I click on this reference text, this field becomes read only. But it allows me to select an expression. Okay, so if I go over here and select expression, I can go grab my my part number and say okay, and then that will populate this field. This text tool takes a little bit of time to get used to, but I'll pick the face that I want to put it on, and then the curve I want it to reference is going to be this curve right here. And you'll end up with this really big chunk of text that's on here. And I'm going to drag this down and kind of position it grossly where I want it to be. And if I come down here to dimensions, there's other things I can do with it. Basically, the offset, I'm going to make that like 0.625, and I want the height to be 1/4 inch. Let's say I want to have a set height. But my W scale, if I set that to 100, it puts the font back to where it's supposed to be for that particular font style. And oddly enough, you have the entire Windows library as your font library, so you could pick some crazy stuff in here. I know that this isn't stuff we're going to actually machine against, but it does engrave my part rather nicely. And I say okay, and I have a feature that shows up here that says text. Okay, if I continue to walk through the end of my part, bring it down here to this extrude. The extrude is created, and this is where it kind of gets a little bit important about how you pick your geometry. If I use an extrude here, and I just pick, say, connected curves and go through and grab, oops, I ended up picking the face instead of the curve itself. I'll get that curve there. Probably don't need it to be quite that big. And if I just go through and pick them like this, I'm going to get some unexpected results when I make changes. So I'm going to go ahead and keep doing this and grab all of these features here, or all of these spline curves. And I want that, I want to subtract out of this block here and say, okay. And it looks like I made a little mistake right there. That's all right. I'll go back and fix that in a bit. If I look at my original extrude over here, edit with rollback, the way I ended up picking those, the text is I ended up picking the actual feature curves themselves. So no matter what happens to that feature, it's going to change. It's going to update my extrude. If I look at my second extrude that I created here and go to edit that again, the way I collected it was connected curves. So let's make a change real quick. Let's say I make an update on this part, and I go to File, Properties, find my part number here, and I want to add in like a _ B for like Rev B, let's say, make that a capital. If I said apply that, you see that my _ B shows up over here, my _ B shows up over here, and if I do a Control W and hide all the curves, this one actually updated no problem. This one is going to be left behind because of the way I've ended up picking the geometry. So this is the intent of what I wanted to create. If you're connected to a Teamcenter database, these attributes they kind of come along for free. So you can pick DB part number, DB part name, DB part rev even, and even more information that you want to pull in directly from your Teamcenter database and print it directly on your part file. So that's a quick and dirty on how I want to engrave my part and use the text tool to do that. I'll go down here to the very end and make this my current feature. So when I created my part file, rather, if I take a look at this little tower back here, I tied my sketch to the geometry of the linked-in geometry that I've created. So if I go in and make another constraint, I can create like a point on a curve constraint. So I could tie this curve to this point right here, and if this face were to change, the size of my my little sketch here will also update and move around. So I'll finish that and go back up to the parent. Another way to get to the parent is just right-click on in my assembly navigator, open in parent, go to the assembly fixture frame. If I were to select this and replace component, I'll browse out to my place where I have this, and I have a Rev B right here. Go ahead and update that, and you'll see my features are updating. And I have a delete face that failed. I'll go in and figure out what happened with that one. And my part ended up pushing this face over just ever so slightly. So if I go back here to my forgot this is built in coordinate space. So when I drop it in, it's going to drop it in way off from where I expected it to be. So essentially what happened with this part is if I measure these, the spacing between these objects here, 4 and basically just about 3/4. And the spacing here was, oh, I gave it 2 vectors. Oops, missed that. And you can basically push that out about ½ an inch from where it originally was. So my fixture updated as it needed to, and the only thing I lost was I had a notification saying that something failed. So I'd go ahead and make this the work part. Look at my delete face here, and I can see how why this ended up failing, because my sketch extrude are no longer doing exactly what I wanted it to do. I'd have to go back and fix this particular part of it, but everything else updated because I had tied it directly to the linked geometry that I put in my part file. So how do you add in new information over here as far as this, like my fixtures and whatnot? If you just right-click in white space here and go to Library Management, I can add a library and then go navigate anywhere in my network. So if I come out here to, let's say, this one in my C temp, Associative Fixture Design, I come out here and just pick fixtures and put in multi-flexible, let's say, and I could give it a different name here. And I see the path where it's going to right here. So this is one where I want to show this off here real quick too. If I go in here to specify, or rather application task, I need to tell it the applications that I want it to be showing up in. If I open up NX with no parts open, that is actually an application called no part. I won't be able to see anything in my reuse library, and if I right click on, I won't be able to see anything to be able to open directly and start my day. So I'll click on all these other ones to turn them on, and then this is now available in those different applications. Okay. And when I do that, I get another one that shows up called webinar, and in that webinar one, it just has the folder that I created for this. Okay. So you see here, I just got a message that said that a block is missing. Okay, so this goes back to my assembly load options again. So if I go to File, Assembly Load Options, it's looking for it as saved. So it should have been able to find that no problem. Generally, this is out of the box set from folder, but I can also set up to a search folder. It's going to search in a location that I don't want to, that I know there's no parts in, so I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of it. And I'm going to add in the fact that I want it to look in my Associative Fixture Design folder, and I want it to follow all of the subfolders. In order to do that, I have to put this little dot, dot, dot right here. So this is called an ellipsis. When I do the ellipsis like that, it will drill subfolders. I say, okay, there. Look at my part navigator. I have this block that's missing. This little spacer block that I put in right here. And now what it did, it went through and searched that folder structure and found the block that was possibly put in a different location. I may have moved it from one folder to another, and it couldn't find it. So these assembly load options when you're working in native are going to be very handy because it's going to show you all the different locations of where all your parts are. I can click on show session folders, and I can see exactly where all these parts come from, and then it'll search all of these folders in a hierarchical manner where it'll search from the top and the second, third, fourth on its way down. Okay. Obviously, as you can see here, my tombstone's a little bit short, and this is an interesting one where I have a reuse library. I know there's a part in my reuse library I want to use. Okay, so I want to replace it with this taller tombstone. Do I need to add it to my assembly first? If I go to right-click, replace component, do I have to then navigate to where that particular part is? Yes, I can do all of that, but one thing I can do too is just grab it right here, and it populates my replace part dialog, and I could just say, okay. Now that part's been replaced. So a part that's in my reuse library that I can see has been replaced, has replaced the part that was in my model. So I didn't have to go navigate to anything. I didn't have to go navigate through my somewhat complex folder structure that may be out on my network and take care of my assembly quickly and easily. This one, I've minimized how many assembly constraints I have in it. In fact, I've just got a few things in here as far as fixed. I've got a few things that are touching and sort of centering up my my part on my tombstone here. But again, if I wanted to fully populate this tombstone, this is basically a right and a left of this particular part. I'm going to hide all these components, and I want to switch my filter to component and select them all. Then right-click, move, and I want to copy them. But I also want to turn on my tombstone again. So if I go to my show hide, show all, and then I say I want to move my handle, I can move my handle, maybe move it right up here so I know it's in this central pivot point. I'm going to uncheck move handle, and when I look at this straight down, I want to basically make a copy of 180. So I've copied those around to the new locations, and I've fully populated up my tombstone very quickly. Now, the one thing about this move copy is it does not copy constraints. So if I look at my part here, I've got some constraints set up in my dependencies window. The part that I copied over has no constraints on it. Same with this part here. If I look at the corresponding part on this side, the constraints don't copy over. NX doesn't have a copy constraints paradigm that's available for us. So that's a quick way of putting it together and using some assembly tools to move things around very quickly and easily. So here's a part that I've downloaded from McMaster. You can probably tell by the part number that I grabbed. What I've done is I've put in some dimensions in here. So this part came in as a body, so there's no intelligent features that are built into this. What I've done is gone through and put in linear and radial dimensions. So if I wanted this part to be wider by ½ inch, I'll go into the 1.5 and make that 1.5. My slot, when I go in and look at the way I built the slot, is I've put an equation in here that essentially looks at the original width dimension and divides that by 2, so my slot's always in the center. Okay, so that's an easy one to fix. I I've named them all. So in I go to my expression editor, I see that I've got my thickness, my width, my slot length, which is some strange number that came in. It's probably best just maybe make that 1.5. Oops, not 105. Geez, 1.5, and apply that. My slot length just gets ever so slightly longer. My slot diameter is 0.44. I can bump that up here to say 0.52, let's say, and apply that, and my slot diameter gets bigger. There's also a slot offset that I put in as well. So maybe I want to add in a 1/4 inch there and apply. So if I just take a little bit of time when I download a part from wherever I download that part and put in some linear and angular linear dimensions and radial dimensions on my part, I can make that part smarter. So when I go to replace it in the context of an assembly, I can do a save as of this part, give it a new part number, and then move on quickly with replacing those components in my assembly. And one last thing. Oops, see there, I didn't find any of the components that I was looking for because I had set it to search folders. I'll switch this back to as saved. And I'll see if I, yep, it finds all my bodies. Just click on the empty files there. So this is one, this is an older vise that is no longer available from the catalog, but it's an older one that I had a model for. And I built some assembly arrangements in here. So looking at the catalog, there was an AA, BB, CC, DD configuration. And so what I've done here is I look at my constraints. You'll see a whole bunch of constraints in here. You'll see some constraints that are even suppressed. Now, this gets to be a little bit advanced in assemblies, and sometimes is a bit tedious. But you'll see why this might pay off here in just a little bit. So if I right-click on this, say arrangements, and I want to go to the BB configuration, that block is now bolted to the other side, and I painted the face on it to show that I've rotated that around. Okay, so this is the counterboard block that goes in here, and I'll just bolt it to the other side. Same thing with this arrangements CC, and another one here, arrangements DD. So it has the 4 different arrangements that I can put this part together in. Another one that I've got shown here is if I highlight this one block, I've got a distance constraint. And in that distance constraint, when you create distance constraints, it starts off with the constraint at first is whatever value it happened to be for its separation. Then I can put in an upper and lower limit and uncheck the distance there, so it's not locked to that value, and will allow it to move between 0 and 8.8 inches. So if I go here and move this component and pull it out, it's going to stop at this 8.8 right there, and it won't let me take it any further than that, and it won't let me take it any further past the stop blocks there. So it kind of looks like it's almost like doing interference checking, but it's not. It's just based on what I've done here. If I were to suppress this distance constraint completely and go to move, you'll see that it will just pass through all the different components. Okay. So put that one back on. If I show this one off real quick, I'll do another move. I'll just copy this one over. And if I would do this again and put another distance constraint in from, say, here to the end, it comes up with 5-point change. I put this in, let's say I want to put that at 4, but then I want to have a distance limits of the lower limit of 0 and the upper limit of 4, and I'll uncheck this one. Right click, move, and slide this up. It'll stop at that face. Slide this back, it'll stop where I left it. So it's a pretty handy tool to add a little bit of intelligence into your part. Go ahead and get rid of that. I don't really need it, and adjust the way it's put together in my part file. So that's using assembly constraints and arrangements. Each one of these constraints is edited in the context it's created as a arrangement specific, and then I have to edit that in arrangements, and then each one of those can have its own value, or suppress, unsuppress those each time. So the one thing I caution about people getting into really complex arrangements is that every time I make a new arrangement, I've basically made a whole new assembly, and I have to tell each of the parts in that arrangement how they're supposed to be mated together in that particular arrangement in that assembly. You can use suppression, and you can have parts suppressed and unsuppressed in assemblies. However, if you were to follow that, and I were to say make another move copy here, and I were to suppress this component in, let's say, AA, it's always suppressed. So now it's suppressed in AA, but when I look at my unpack my jaws here, I have one that's suppressed. If I were to switch my arrangements to say BB, that part comes back and is no longer suppressed. And what this will do is these parts will always be part of your parts list. However, I can use suppression in my arrangements to show components in different locations as well. So instead of changing where the constraints are and editing those constraints based on each of the different arrangements, I can actually use suppression. The only thing I caution about that is if you're going to use a parts list, it's going to count up all your components regardless of their suppression status and tell you that you've got 15 of these jaw faces in there when you only need 2, but you've made a whole bunch of different arrangements to show them in different locations and different thicknesses and whatnot. So just something to kind of watch out for. All right. Well, thank you for your attendance, and have a wonderful rest of your day.